Hello and welcome. My name is Mary and I'm the host of Prologues, a lifestyle podcast where each episode is like a digital journal entry detailing whatever it is I'm going through in life at the moment. I talk about my journey with mental health, relationships, wellness, beauty, personal development, and more. So join me every Monday morning for a reminder that we're all still figuring out life for the first time and you are still in the beginning of your personal story.
Good morning. Welcome back to Prologues. First and foremost, I want to apologize for my voice. I'm sick right now. I was trying to gaslight myself for several days into thinking I wasn't sick, and I pushed forward and I kept working out. I kept leaving my house, not really in contact with people, but I kept going on walks and walking my dog, things like that. And of course, that's not how health works. And I think I made myself worse, and now my body is shutting down, and I have been forced to accept that I am sick. So I had a 3-hour recording session booked in the studio today. I like to do 3-hour blocks because I can record a few episodes at a time. And I had to cancel my session because I just know I'm going to have to pause this recording about 50 times in order to cough up a lung. So I'm here. I'm armed with cough syrup, lozenges, cold and flu medication, my echinacea, my vitamin C, my my elderberry. And we are going to get through this recording together. I didn't even have a voice 2 days ago. This could potentially ruin my voice for the next couple of days, but we move. So I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little funny on this recording. I've been coughing a lot, so my throat feels a bit raw. We're going to get through this together, you guys, okay? Anyway, welcome back to another episode of Prologues. I believe this episode is going live, when is it? First week of February, I think. I've seen so many people say that January felt like the longest month. It was the worst month, bad start to the year. 2025 actually starts in February, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to be annoying right now. I do think I had a pretty good start to the year. In the first episode of this season, I told you guys that I was going to be taking a very slow January, and I'm so glad I did. I'm making a note of this because I need to do this every year from here on out. We didn't really make social plans. Our first social plan was on January 25th. We both did dry January also until January 25th. That was Burns night and a birthday and housewarming party for a friend of ours. So we knew we were going to end dry January a few days early, but we went on 5 hikes. We had loads of alone time. We took Fergus on tons of like huge nature walks. We cooked at home, got stuck into a couple reality TV shows, just very cozy, very quiet. I read like 6 books, just slow. And that is different than what most of my Januaries look like. I feel that most of us try to take a hit the ground running approach, but I also spoke to you guys about how I'm trying to wait until the start of spring to really turn my boss bitch brain on. It's not on right now. In fact, it's probably more off than it's ever been. But I think this has ended up being a great start to the year because of that. I know that sometimes planning a slow month is out of our control, but I think limiting social plans and trying to really connect with nature, spend a load of time doing offline hobbies and things made for a great month. And I don't think you have to wait until the first of the month or the first of the year to do something like that. I think this is, like I told you guys, the year of being alone, the year of investing in myself. And so far, it's going really well. I can already tell I need to cough. Wow, 3 minutes and 49 seconds in, and I just had to pause the recording. Oh my God. We're going to get through this, you guys. Never say that I don't love you and love this podcast because I feel like death right now. So, anyway, good start to the year, I think. I'm looking forward to my February. I figure I'll give a little catch up. My 5-year anniversary with my husband is coming up in just a couple of days. By the time you're listening to this, it'll be this week. Obviously, I mean 5 years of being together. We're coming up on 3 years of marriage, which is crazy, but 5 years of being together. This is the longest relationship I've ever been in, and obviously the most serious considering we're married. And so this 5-year mark, because 5 just feels like a big number, multiples of 5 feel like big milestones in relationships to me. So we have planned something. We don't always do things for anniversary. We also have a couple anniversaries. So we have like our dating anniversary in early February. Then there's Valentine's Day. Then we have the anniversary of us eloping and the anniversary of our wedding also coming up. So there's a lot of things to celebrate. So we usually combine our dating anniversary with Valentine's Day, and then we celebrate We only celebrate the number of years that we've actually been married. We don't celebrate the number of years since our wedding day. So we just celebrate a general marriage anniversary. We don't always do something for our anniversary. We didn't do anything for it last year, but because this is 5 years, it feels a little bit like a bigger deal. So we've booked this Airbnb down just below the border in England. We're taking Fergie Wergie, and it's a beautiful Airbnb in the countryside. There's a sauna and a hot tub. We did something similar in October where we booked an Airbnb in the borders. We brought Fergus, we read, we were offline, we enjoyed the hot tub for a weekend, and it was a wonderful weekend. So we're doing something similar, but going to England this time, which is exciting. I haven't really spent much time to speak of in England. I've been to London very briefly. So I'm eager to see how the English countryside compares to the Scottish countryside. Obviously, dry January will be over, so might have a few glasses of champagne in the hot tub over the weekend, take Fergus on loads of country walks, and it should be wonderful and romantic. I'm looking forward to that a lot. I also have a friend from the States visiting me in February. This is a friend who I lived with. Well, I've known her for almost 9 years. We were roommates for a year during COVID. She was in my wedding as one of my bridesmaids. Really great person, really great friend. And she's good friends with Matthew as well. So she's coming to stay. I think she's been to the UK 7 times, and she's been to Scotland maybe 7 times. Yeah, she loves the UK. She loves Scotland. She's been to Edinburgh before. So it'll be great to see her, and also a lovely taste of home to have around. And then also in February, I'm going on a stendu, a stag and hen do. Stag is a bachelor party, hen is a bachelorette party. So it's basically a joint bachelorette for some of our friends who are getting married this year. And it's a ski trip to Chamonix. I'm really excited. I have skied a lot actually, but not in the last 6 years. So I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to take it super slow. I am not expecting to leave the blues. I did allow myself to buy some cute bits and bobs for the trip though. There's also some themes. So one night the girls and the guys are going to split up and do separate stag and hen things. And so there's a theme for the girls' night, and there's also a theme for one of the skiing days. So it's fun to get little costumey bits and pieces. I think that should be fun as well. February is typically one of my least favorite months of the year because the glow from the holidays and the excitement of the new year has faded away, but it's still just winter. And I love winter, but I do think February is the worst month. But there's a lot of fun things happening this month. So I do have a good feeling. I've also been reading so much. I started a story graph. Let me guys know if you want to follow me on story graph. I'm not doing a ton with it. It's really just for my own like personal documentation. I'm not really posting in a content sense, just really keeping a reading journal and a log of all the books I'm reading. But if you want to follow me on there, you can. I feel like I'm heavily back in my reading era. I take breaks, I go back and forth, and I also take breaks with genres. I'll get really stuck in one genre and then not leave it for a while. But I've been exploring lots of different genres, and I read 6 books in January, and I feel like that's pretty good. My goal is 50 for the year. Another life update I have is that I recently, last week, had my second period since getting off of hormonal birth control, which makes it my second period in about 7 years. I've spoken pretty extensively on my other social media platforms about my reasons for getting off of hormonal birth control. So if you want, I'll link the TikTok where I talk about it in depth down in the description box if you would like to listen to it. I'm not going to go super in depth here other than to say I got off of it because I'm trying to figure out the root cause of some health issues that I've had. I always feel the need to say, especially given our current political climate, that I am very pro birth control, completely pro choice. I do not believe in or support the fear mongering surrounding birth control. I will probably get back on it as soon as I figure out what's going on with me. The only reason I got off of it is because I had to change birth controls when I moved to the UK, and I just had some difficulties and I started having these health issues and I didn't really know what was going on. I got blood work done, I tested. I think this was all going on during the break from the podcast actually, so I don't think I've ever spoken on the podcast about this, but I had blood work done. I was testing my thyroid, testing my vitamin levels. It was a difficult time for me medically between like September and November, I would say. It was actually kind of good. I was on the podcast break at that time because I was really focusing on myself. But I do have, I think, every intention of getting back on birth control once I sort of figure out what's going on with me. And maybe that won't be hormonal birth control. Maybe, I've been reading a lot about the copper IUD and things. Anyway, I can't speak about getting off of birth control without making it very clear how pro birth control and pro choice I am. All of that being said, I did just have my second period in about 7 years last week, and it rocked me because I have not menstruated in such a long time, I have not really taken the time to learn about the nitty-gritty details of what my body would feel like if I am menstruating, because even though I was very informed about what the menstrual cycle and the reproductive cycle looks like, I was a teenager the last time it was actually happening to me, and so I just wasn't learning about it while it was happening to me. So I feel like now I am. Like, I knew what the luteal phase and the follicular phase and everything was before this, but I'd obviously hadn't experienced it since knowing the names of these parts of the process, if that makes sense. So now I do, and now I am experiencing it, and it is tough. I used to have the worst periods when I was a teenager, which is one of the reasons I got on birth control. I'm talking throwing up, not being able to walk, in pain, getting faint, just loads of issues. It hasn't gotten that bad yet, but there was about a day and a half last week when I started my period. So, like, the sort of like half of the first day and all of the second day, I just felt like a shell of a person. No energy, in pain. I barely left my bed the second day because I just felt out of it. Mental fog, exhaustion. I was like frantically Googling all of my symptoms just to make sure that this wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And everything was like, your iron is low, your estrogen is dropping, all these things. So, like I said, even though I know how the menstrual cycle works, this is the first time as an adult where I'm really experiencing it in real time. And it's been a lot. It has been a lot. I would love to get back on birth control. I'm just waiting until I really know what's going on with my body. I've gotten this question several times since talking about going off of it. People have asked me, well, what are you using for birth control? We are using barrier methods. I am tracking my period, but that's really just to educate myself about what my body feels like at different points in my cycle. I am not using period tracking as a method of birth control, and I wouldn't. So I am primarily using barrier methods as my form of birth control, which so far has been working well. It's obviously not as convenient as being on a hormonal birth control, but God, being a woman is not fun a lot of the time when it comes to things like this. So it's very much something I'm actively going through and trying to figure out. I'm trying to make sure my supplements are suited towards what my body is going through. I'm actually meeting with a specialist in February, about midway through February, to talk about it, to get my blood work done again, actually, and to talk about, do I have different dietary needs? Do I have different vitamin deficiencies now that I'm getting my periods back for the first time in 7 years? It's like a whole journey that I'm on. So yeah, that it rocked me. I was not prepared to wake up on the second day of my period and literally not be able to get out of bed for most of the day. I got up to shower and then I dragged myself into the living room at one point and then couldn't get off the couch. It was crazy. And now this week I'm sick. So it's been a bit of a time with my body lately, but mentally I'm actually doing well, which is unusual for me. Knock on wood. No expectations for how long this is going to last. I'm just enjoying it as it comes. I was going to do favorites this week as well because you guys enjoyed them 2 weeks ago, but I've been talking for quite a bit and I don't want the intro to be longer than the body of the episode. So I'll save the favorites for next week. And let's just get into the main topic of this video. You need to feel your feelings and you need to stop intellectualizing your feelings. I'm calling you out right now. Stop it. And this is how you're going to stop it. This episode is inspired by an outburst of emotion that I had this morning. I've been suppressing my feelings for about a week and a half. Following the inauguration, I have felt addicted to the news cycle in a very toxic way. And although I believe it's very important to stay informed, I think you do have to find a balance between being informed about current events and being consumed by them and crashing out because you're allowing it to affect your mental health. And for the last week and a half, I've just been toxically consuming news every second. And that's brought up a lot of really difficult emotions for me that I've just been suppressing and suppressing and suppressing. This morning, I woke up and I saw a piece of news that was very devastating to me, and it triggered this big emotional outburst. I called my mom and was on the phone with my mom for like 2 hours because I just couldn't stop crying, and I've cried like 6 different times today. And I came to this realization. I was crying so much because I was releasing all of the stress emotions and sad emotions that I had been bottling up for a week and a half. And a week and a half is not that long to be bottling up your feelings. And yet, as an emotional person who feels things super deeply, a week and a half was enough for me to have like this 2 hour crying outburst today. And so I was thinking about intellectualizing your feelings, suppressing your emotions, how to feel your feelings, because normally I'm really good at that. And that's why I've decided to record this episode today. I was gonna record something else, but I would like to record this today. I'm a big believer in the idea that the only way out is through. The only way to truly process your emotions and come to terms with them and allow them to go, like allow them to pass you by, is to feel them. You're never going to accept something or truly get over something or heal from it or move on unless you feel it. Normally, I'm pretty good at feeling my feelings. I'm typically not one to intellectualize my feelings, at least not since I have been working on that in therapy for the last couple of years. I'm super emotional. I would say I'm very in touch with my feelings. I cry a lot, but I also feel really deeply like joyful and happy, and I feel a lot of compassion and empathy and anger. Every emotion you can think of, I feel it, and it's deep. I'm connected to my feelings and I feel like I express them a lot. But something I hear frequently from you guys and from friends is that you don't know how to feel your feelings. You just suppress them or you intellectualize them. When I had a therapist on the podcast last year, I asked you all for questions to ask her, and so many people ask, how do I stop intellectualizing my feelings? That's the religious trauma episode with Dr. Shelby, if you want to go listen to it. By the way, if you're on Spotify, you can go to the Prologues page, scroll up, and there's a search bar, and you can type in keywords. So if you're wondering if I've made an episode on certain topics or if you're trying to find an old episode, that's the best way. So if you go to that search bar and you look up religious trauma, you will find the episode I did with a clinical psychologist and psychodynamic therapist named Dr. Shelby Reap. And it's a long episode. It's almost 2 hours long, but that is one of the questions that I asked her was about intellectualizing your feelings. She gave a great response, but on more the patient side of it, I wanted to talk about it again today. So if you're curious what I mean when I say intellectualizing your feelings, there's a few different ways I can think to describe it. I think people who intellectualize are emotionally numb, not in touch with your feelings. Maybe something really sad happens to you and you feel like you should be crying, but you're not. It's compartmentalizing your feelings, maybe avoiding them. It's not the same thing as processing. A lot of intellectualizing is trying to rationalize your feelings with logic. And it's a defense mechanism against intense feelings. It is not comfortable to have a crying breakdown or to feel angry or to sit in your grief. Sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to put a name to your feelings. Maybe you have stigmas in your head about the type of person who feels depressed or the type of person who feels anxious, and you don't want to be that type of person because you've attached negative connotations to those words and descriptors, so you just don't allow yourself to feel them. So, intellectualization is a defense mechanism against allowing yourself to feel intense emotions. Intellectualizing is not a good thing. It stops you from connecting with others. It stops you from showing compassion to yourself when you're going through hard times. It definitely stops you from showing compassion to other people. It keeps you from being able to relate to other people. It suppresses your empathy. It's not good for you. Intellectualizing also looks like minimizing your feelings, joking about your feelings, and trying to solve your feelings as if your emotions are puzzles to be finished or problems to be solved or logic puzzles. I think something that's important to point out here is that logic does not equal moral. So just because you can sit down and intellectually dissect what you're feeling and come up with the reason why you're feeling that way, that is not morally better than just bursting out in tears. I think we really stigmatize emotions. We criticize people for being too emotional. We especially criticize women for being too emotional. That's why we have terms like hysterical. But there's nothing wrong with emotions. They're not good or bad. They're not moral or immoral. What you do with your emotions and how you act on your emotions can stray into moral, good, bad territory, but just having them is neutral. If you've ever been in an argument with your partner where you're trying to express how you feel and they're offering you solutions instead of just listening to how you feel, then you know logic doesn't fix everything. You can't solve emotions with logic a lot of the time. Although I do think it's important to dive into the root of your issues and understand why you're feeling what you're feeling. The process doesn't stop there. And I think what people who intellectualize their feelings struggle with is feeling like because they're intellectualizing their feelings, that's the end of the process. So therapy won't be helpful for them. Other forms of mental wellness and mental care won't be helpful either because they already know why they're feeling what they're feeling. But knowing why isn't the same as processing. It's definitely not the same as healing and growing. And also, I'm going to make some people mad when I say this, but intellectualizing your feelings doesn't make you intellectually superior. Intellectualizing your feelings does not equate to having more emotional intelligence. It's a coping mechanism, a defense mechanism. And it's hard to feel your feelings because it's hard to be uncomfortable. But I truly think that it's necessary for healing, growth, and just moving on. And this doesn't just affect people mentally either. I read an article about how intellectualizing your feelings and suppressing them can impact your physical health as well. It can lead to heightened stress, high blood pressure, and a weakened immune system. I'm not saying that I'm sick this week because I was really suppressing my emotions for a week and a half because I don't know if that was long enough to be suppressing emotions in order to make me sick. It's also cold season, so, but the science says suppressing your feelings can weaken your immune system because it leads to more stress. And also, I think it's impossible to suppress forever. I think everyone gets to a breaking point at some moment where the emotions just burst out because they've been bottled up. And usually, when that happens, those emotions become destructive when they didn't need to be. I say all of this to say, to try to convince you that if you are someone who struggles with intellectualizing your feelings, that should be something you would like to work on. I'm saying all of this to try to convince you to work on processing your feelings and really going through them because most mental health professionals agree, or maybe they all do, I don't know, that intellectualizing your feelings is not the most mentally well path to take. But I also don't want to come across like I'm criticizing you either. This is difficult. It is very hard to feel your feelings. How many times am I going to say feelings in this episode? I hope you guys don't think that feelings stop sounding like a real word. It's already starting to not sound like a real word to me. Yeah, I also want you to know I'm not criticizing you. I'm not looking down on anyone because it is very difficult. Intellectualization can feel comforting, I think, temporarily because it's like you're protecting yourself from the anguish and the pain of sitting in sadness or grief or anger, or whatever it may be. But I do think that relief is temporary. So I've put together a few techniques that I use to process my emotions and to feel my feelings. And I've written them down. I'm going to share them. However, I did also think while I was preparing this episode, I was like, even just listening to a podcast episode to get a step by step guide on how to stop intellectualizing is kind of intellectualizing because you can't always solve emotional problems with logical solutions. And yet here I am writing out a list, and here you are listening to this list of like, okay, here's step 1 to feeling your feelings, step 2 to feeling your feelings, which is just kind of funny to me. Those two ideas seem antithetical, but I don't think they are. So, like I said towards the beginning, I really believe that the only way out is through, meaning you can't circumvent the hard feelings. You can't skirt around them. You can't avoid them forever. The only way to process and move on is to feel and go straight down the middle. So, how do we do that? Here are all of my tips that I use personally to try to feel my feelings, express them in a healthy way, and process. I think something that a lot of people struggle with, myself included, is learning how to name the feelings because you don't have the emotional awareness or even just the vocabulary to put a name to the feeling. And I think it's easy to confuse one feeling for another. Sometimes anger is really grief. Sometimes anxiety is really adrenaline. There's a difference between sadness and grief. There's a difference between rage and being indignant at injustice. I don't want to stereotype here, but I think this is something men struggle with a lot. Have you ever noticed how men tend to not classify anger as an emotion? Have you ever heard a man criticize women for being too emotional, but then they will like their favorite sports teams lose and they punch a hole in the wall and start screaming at the TV? Like anger is an emotion. So I think this is something a lot of people struggle with is just learning how to identify. You need to have some tools in your toolkit when it comes to successfully identifying your emotions. I think one way to do this is through noticing the physical sensations in your body and tracking what those sensations are at different times in your life. So for example, for me, anxiety is like a heaviness in my chest. Sadness and depression is like a gloom, like a sort of just a weight all over me. If you can
bring yourself out of your head and into your body and notice, okay, is my heart rate more rapid? Do I feel a churning in my stomach? Is my skin feeling prickly? These are all sensations that come with emotions. Do I feel a lightness in my head? Do I feel bubbles in my chest? Like bubbles in my chest is like a really joyful, laughing feeling for me. Pay attention to those physical sensations, and over time, you'll be able to identify where the feeling is really coming from. I think another way is talking about it with someone or talking, journaling, or speaking to a friend, maybe even talking to yourself. Because I think forcing yourself to put your feelings into words can help you dive deeper. How often have you been ranting to a friend or venting to someone, and 20 minutes in, you make this like mental discovery and unlock a new level of the conversation? Like, say you're venting to a friend about something that somebody did to you. Have you ever halfway through that conversation been like, oh, well, maybe it was because of this, or I just remembered that? I think speaking and journaling is a great way to navigate those feelings, a great way to describe them. Describing is not intellectualizing, describing is helpful. Something you might find helpful is Googling the emotions table or the emotions wheel. It's basically just a chart that shows a bunch of more surface level emotions, and then under each one, it breaks it down into more niche, smaller categories. Like, for example, there's one that's about anger. And then under anger, it says hurt, threatened, hateful, mad, aggressive. But then under hurt, it says devastated, embarrassed. Under hateful, it says violated, resentful. I think there's several iterations of the emotions wheel or the emotions table, but another category would be like bad. But then under bad, it says bored, busy, stressed, tired, indifferent, apathetic. What's another good one? Under sad, it says lonely, vulnerable, despair, guilty. Under happy, it says playful, inquisitive, accepted, proud. I think this is a great tool. I would really recommend, if you're someone who struggles with intellectualizing your feelings, to take a look at the feelings wheel or the emotions wheel. You can literally get a printout of it. And when you're journaling or when you're speaking to a therapist or to a friend, you can have it on hand to reference and really figure out what's going on underneath the surface. I think also recognizing that, anger is rarely just anger. Sadness is rarely just sadness. These are really surface level words that describe complex emotions. And you can also take note of what has happened that day, what's happened in that moment that might provoke that feeling. Once you know how to name the feeling, I think you can connect to it. I think you'll be able to speak about it in a more honest and vulnerable way, because you're sort of forcing yourself to be in touch with your genuine state. I feel like when you intellectualize, it's easy to put up a front, but if you're sitting down and digging deep and naming that feeling, you can't do that. It forces you to be authentic. I think another important step here is really coming to terms with the fact that emotions are not good or bad, which I referenced earlier. What people mean when they say good feeling or bad feeling, I think, is pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. Happiness, joy, pride, those are pleasant feelings, whereas anger, grief, depression, anxiety are unpleasant feelings. But unpleasant does not mean bad. It is not a moral judgment. Emotions are neutral. Emotions are also tools that we can use because they're helpful in different situations. If you are comforting a friend who, let's say, just got laid off from their job, if you can't access your empathy, if you can't recognize their emotions and lend your own to that situation, your friend is not going to feel better. Anger can be motivating. Anger at an injustice that has happened to you can be motivating. My therapist always tells me that anger is usually because of injustice. Anxiety can prepare you for a threat. It can heighten your senses, make you more aware of your surroundings. Emotions can guide your decision making. They can prompt you to take action. They can help you connect with other people. I think this is a big one. Being in touch with your emotions allows you to connect with other people, which makes your friendships better. It makes your romantic relationships better, your relationships with family better. Having a strong emotional reaction, and right now an unpleasant emotional reaction, is likely going to cause you to confront the source of that emotion. So emotions can be very helpful. And having an unpleasant reaction, having an unpleasant emotion does not constitute a moral failing. And having emotions that don't make sense doesn't make you dumb. And I think that can be difficult when you're intellectualizing as well, because you feel this sense of moral, or not even moral. You feel this sense of pride in being able to parse through your feelings. And when you are in the thick of it and you feel confused by your emotions and they're overwhelming you, I think it's difficult to not feel like childish or overwhelmed or out of control. I think we almost look at being overwhelmed by emotions as immature. And we, like as a society, we look at intellectualizing your feelings and suppressing them as a sign of maturity. I really disagree with that. I think there is a mature way to process and express your feelings, but having strong emotions is not immature. Once you let go of this idea of good emotions versus bad emotions, you can stop judging yourself so harshly for having them. And once you release the judgment, you can do something about the feelings. So let's talk about emotional expression and release. I made an episode before the break titled The Opposite of Anxiety is Action. And I talked about this idea of getting out of your head and into your body and how important physical action is for releasing emotion. I also talked about this in the episode I just did, which is Lessons from My Therapist, where I talked about how physical movement can help you process trauma and help your brain organize that information in a healthier way. So I do think physical activity is a great way to release and express emotions. I also think intellectualizing comes with this feeling of emotional numbness and being stuck, and physical activity sort of breaks the dam, gets you unstuck. And I think that's because exercise can release endorphins and can improve your mind body connection out of the head into the body. There's also emotional ways of expressing as well. I think journaling is a really big one. You guys know I love to journal. If you don't know what to write about, you can either free write or use prompts. Free writing is when you sit down, you put pen to paper, or you can do it in your notes app. You can do people journal on their laptops, like typing it out? That is a foreign concept to me, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. You basically set a timer and you say, for the next 10 minutes, I am not going to stop writing. Even if that means that you write, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write over and over and over again until you think of something, then that's what you do. Some days you have an outpouring of words just bursting forth out of you. Some days you feel stuck and you're in that loop of, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. But if you struggle with journaling, this is a great tool because you will think of something will come up. Just getting your hand moving, getting the words down on the paper is going to unlock things in your brain. If you don't want to free write, or if you feel like that's not helping, you can also use journal prompts. I frequently give journal prompts in these episodes. Google journal prompts related to your specific situation or just prompts in general. And that prompts usually take the form of a question that you then ponder over and you write down your answer. And again, once you start writing down your answer, then you'll think of another thing and you'll jump to another topic and so on and so forth. I have a friend who I admire very much. I need to have her on the podcast, who told me that she starts every single morning with 3 pages of free writing. So 3 full notebook pages of free writing. And she said it's a time where she feels very creative, very inspired. She has great ideas. I need to start doing that. I just remember that while recording this episode. Used to have a daily journaling practice before I moved. You guys know that my morning routine after I moved kind of got a little out of whack, kind of haywire. Because I'm settled more into my life now, I think I really need to pick that back up. I do plan every single day now, like with my planner. I need to add my journaling and my manifestation back into that routine because those 3 things I feel like set my day up for success so well. But you don't have to do 3 pages. I know a friend who sets a timer for 30 minutes. If that doesn't fit into your routine, it doesn't fit into your routine. This is about making it accessible and sustainable for you. And so if that's 5 minutes or half a page or 4 sentences, whatever it looks like, building that into your routine, putting it on your to-do list, making a note in your calendar, whatever it takes, but getting that regular emotional expression is going to be great for you mentally. And you're also building this muscle of feeling your feelings. I think when you are so used to intellectualizing, Feeling your feelings is daunting because you don't know how, you're not practiced at it. But so much of emotional wellness and mental well-being is like a muscle that you have to exercise, and it gets easier over time, which is why I can sit here and say that I'm pretty good at feeling my feelings. It's not because I have some like just I'm inherently more emotionally intelligent than someone else. Not at all. I would not describe myself in that way whatsoever. I would describe myself as someone who puts effort into exercising mental wellness and applying it into their life. And that's why I feel confident and comfortable in my feelings now. But I still struggle with it. I mean, I just told you guys that I spent a week and a half really suppressing my feelings because the news was making me numb. And today it all came pouring out. So this is not something that you just learn once and then you never have to learn it again. This is an ongoing practice. That's why people describe their self-care routines as a wellness practice, because you have to do it constantly. If you do not feel comfortable journaling or speaking to someone about your feelings, I think there are other ways of creative expression, whether that be drawing, painting, making something. You can tell when you consume a piece of art or a piece of music and the artist has poured their heart and soul into it. So any form of making something is great because you're not only like doing something with your hands, but you can also channel everything you're feeling into that work. You could also practice meditation. So one of the foundational principles of meditation is, oh my God, another coughing fit. You guys have no idea how many times I have paused this recorder to cough, have a cough drop, drink water, etc. But you can practice meditation. So when you're meditating, which you can learn how to do through YouTube tutorials or apps or in a yoga class, you are learning how to train your mind to be still and to acknowledge emotions without letting them take your brain over, if that makes sense. So I've heard it described to me as sitting still and like you're looking out at the ocean, and the emotions are the ship sailing by. So you can observe the ship coming closer to you, but you let it go by. You don't have to board the ship. So it's seeing an emotion come your way, pausing, acknowledging it, recognizing it for what it is, and allowing it to go by. And meditation is really about stilling your mind and quieting all of the outside noise and distraction. I would say meditation is not easy. When I don't meditate for an extended period of time, I feel like I can't do it anymore. That's definitely a practice. That's why if you download a meditation app like Headspace or something, you'll start out doing like 2 minutes a day. If you're an active overthinker and an anxious girl like I am, meditation feels very foreign, and it can even cause you more stress, because if you're sitting there and you know you're not supposed to be dwelling and like overthinking, but you are, then you start overthinking about how you're overthinking and not meditating correctly, and then you just spiral. So meditation can be difficult. However, I will say the phases of my life where I've had a really diligent daily meditation practice have been some of the most mentally calm and present and connected moments in my life. This is reminding me that I need to do this again too. I need to daily journal. I need to get back into my meditation. I've been really good at my physical activity lately, and I've been really good about talking about my feelings, but recording this episode is highlighting to me that I could be doing more. So I need to do more. Well, also when it comes to emotional release, we've all heard this and it's so true. Crying is good for you. Crying releases stress hormones, but getting yourself to cry when you feel numb is really difficult. One of my favorite movies is The Holiday, and I love the scene. Oh God, that scene where she's leaving Jude Law and she cries for the first time since she was 15, because her parents got divorced when she was 15 and she hasn't cried since, and nothing can make her cry, and breaking up with boyfriends and getting cheated on, nothing makes her cry, but then leaving Jude Law in the countryside to go back home to her house in LA like makes her start sobbing in the taxi cab, and then she's running towards him in the snowy British countryside. Like, I'm sure you've seen it. Now I'm going on and on. I just love that movie. But crying is good for you. If you have a hard time crying, cheat. Fake it till you make it. Watch sad movies, watch sad TikToks, read sad books, listen to sad music, just anything you can think of to kickstart it. Something that never fails to make me cry. Videos of senior dogs, or those people who vlog their dog's last day on earth before they have to get put down or something. Instant sobbing on my end. Also, military homecomings, videos of little kids getting glasses for the first time and like seeing for the first time, or videos of people putting on those colorblind glasses and seeing full colors for the first time, videos of babies giggling. Like, there are so many things that just make me cry without fail. And if you struggle with feeling numb and you have all those pent up emotions inside of you, once you start crying about one thing, no matter what that thing is, it is all gonna come out.
all of it. So if you need to cry, don't be afraid to fake it till you make it. Put yourself in your room, lay down on your bed, turn all the lights off, turn on the saddest music album you can think of, and let it out. Crying is not a weakness. Crying is not a failure. It's actually physically so good for you. Crying releases endorphins, so it actually helps with physical and emotional pain. And it's also soothing. I always feel a little bit calmer and more settled after I've been crying. I also kind of like the way that my face looks when I wake up in the morning if I cried the night before. This is so random, but when I cry, my eyes get puffy and my under eyes get puffy and it fills out my under eye bags. And when I wake up the next morning, I'm like, wow, I can tell that I was crying because I don't have dark circles. Oh, that's so vain, but there's other benefits from crying that have nothing to do with that. I also feel like I sleep really well after I cry. Like a great cry exhausts you at nighttime and then you just like, sleep like a baby. So recap, learn how to name your feelings. Recognize that your feelings and your emotions are not good or bad. They're just pleasant or unpleasant, and that is not a moral indication. You can move your body to get out of frozen mode, talk about it, express your emotions, cheat with crying if you need to. And also, I've seen a lot of people say that because they intellectualize their feelings, they feel like therapy can't help them. And I've seen people share their stories about how they've gotten to therapy and their therapist has been like, well, you already know why you feel the way you feel. Like, you're really self aware. So I can't help you. There's nothing I can do for you. That makes me really sad when I hear that because I don't think that's true. And no therapist I've ever had has thought that is true either. And what I mean by that is I don't think it's true that therapy can't help you if you're self-aware and if you intellectualize your feelings because you're missing a part of the process, which is feeling and going through it. I don't think therapy how do I word this? Therapy is not always a feasible choice. And I really understand that. But if you have never tried therapy because you feel like you're really self aware and there's nothing a therapist could do for you, I just want to say that in my experience with the right therapist, the therapist is not telling you why you feel the way you feel. They're helping you through the feelings and helping you come up with a plan for how to manage your mental health better in the future. I think possibly there's this misconception that when you go to a therapist, you go and you sit down and you talk about your life and then they just like tell you what to do or they give you the answer sheet. That's not my experience with a good therapist. A good therapist is there to encourage you and cheer you on, but they're not like your guide. You still have to figure things out yourself. They just help you. There's been times where, my therapist will realize something about me and what I'm saying weeks before I realize it, but she lets me get to that conclusion myself because that's what's best for me. So if you have had a really negative experience with therapy because the way you intellectualize feelings, that's very valid. I think, unfortunately, sometimes therapists are just not the right fit for either your personality or your problem. Like some therapists are simply not equipped to treat you for certain problems and conditions. So that's very valid. I'm a big fan of therapy. And therapy has really changed my life for the better with the right therapist. And I would just encourage you to not write off therapy completely. And if you've never tried therapy and that is an option for you, I would encourage you to try it. Once you find the right therapist and you find a good fit, it's really amazing what you can unlock in your life. Anyway, I think that I have maybe 5 minutes of speaking time left before my voice just totally, totally goes. I don't know if it sounds weird on the recording. It sounds weird in my head because I also have blocked sinuses. And you know how your own voice, like when you have blocked sinuses, it sounds like tinny and deep. That's how it sounds to me right now. If you've made it to the end of this episode with my weird voice and my sick voice coming through, I really appreciate you. And hopefully next week is back to normal. I rescheduled my recording session for next week because also, like, this week I obviously don't have video. You do not want to see me right now. I'm not getting on camera looking like this. My skin looks green and my nose is red and my eyes are sunken into my head. Like, I'm a tragic mess right now. So hopefully next week I'll be back to normal, back with video, back in the studio. But I do just want to thank you for making it to the end of this episode with me. So wherever you are and wherever you're listening, I really appreciate you spending your Monday morning with me. And I will talk to you very, very soon. Bye.